A man accused of abducting and killing a 5-year-old girl from central Minnesota has been sentenced to life in prison without parole. Zachary Todd Anderson was originally charged with 19 counts for the death of the girl. An autopsy found that the girl was strangled.
At 8:30 a.m., Alana was gone. Her bed hadn't been slept in properly. Her blanket was missing. And inside the house, there was no sign of the 5-year-old girl anywhere. At first, it wasn't clear what had happened, but investigators quickly realized she wasn't the only thing missing. Her father's pickup truck was gone. His phone was gone. And Zachary Anderson, a family acquaintance who had spent the night in the home, was also missing. Within hours, this stopped being treated as a missing child case and started being treated as an abduction. Alana had last been seen alive sometime during the early morning hours, inside her family's home in Watkins. She had been put to bed around 2 a.m., wrapped in her favorite blanket. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no immediate indication of what had happened inside the house. But by morning, Alana had disappeared. So had Zachary Anderson, and so had the truck. At 9:56 a.m., law enforcement was notified. Officers responded immediately. Based on Alana's age, investigators ruled out the possibility that she had left voluntarily. 5-year-olds do not leave home on their own without assistance. At 1:12 p.m., an Amber Alert was issued. This officially confirmed investigators believed Alana had been abducted and was in immediate danger. Investigators began examining digital evidence. They tracked the father's phone. Cell tower data showed the phone had moved away from Watkins and entered Todd County. The last signal was recorded at approximately 9:01 a.m. After that, the phone stopped transmitting. Around the same time, investigators received another critical development. Zachary Anderson's father contacted authorities. He reported that his son had called him earlier that morning and asked permission to go to the family's remote cabin, located approximately 90 miles away from Watkins. This gave investigators a specific location to search. A warrant was approved quickly. Officers left immediately. When investigators arrived at the Anderson property, they located the missing pickup truck. It had been concealed in a ravine, positioned deliberately to avoid detection. At that point, investigators were no longer dealing with uncertainty. They were dealing with evidence. Inside the cabin, officers discovered weapons, ammunition, and items indicating Zachary Anderson had been there recently. There was also blood present at the location, but Alana was not there, and neither was Zachary Anderson. Search teams expanded their efforts into the surrounding area. K-9 units were deployed. At approximately 4:24 p.m., a tracking dog located Zachary Anderson. He was standing in swamp water, partially submerged. He did not attempt to run. He was detained without incident. Officers immediately began questioning him. They asked where Alana was. He initially denied knowing anything. He avoided direct answers. But after continued questioning, he made a statement. He told investigators she was in the swamp. He led officers to the location. Approximately a quarter-mile away, investigators discovered Alana's body. She had been placed in the water and concealed beneath debris. Her blanket was found nearby. At 6:02 p.m., the Amber Alert was canceled. The investigation was no longer focused on finding a missing child. It had become a homicide investigation. To understand how this happened, investigators had to examine the events leading up to that night. Watkins was a small town with a population of roughly 1,000 people. It was not known for violent crime. Most residents knew each other. Zachary Anderson was not a stranger. He was known to the family. He was a co-worker of Alana's father, someone they trusted, someone they had allowed to stay overnight in their home. That decision would become the central focus of the investigation. The night Alana disappeared had started normally. On August 19, 2016, her father Matt had gone out with his co-worker and friend, Zachary Anderson. They had been playing in a local softball league, and like they had done many times before, they stopped for drinks afterward. The bar closed at 1 a.m. After that, they went to another bar nearby, Gordy's, located just a few blocks from Matt's home. There was nothing unusual about that night. No arguments, no reports of conflict, no indication that anything was wrong. Back at the house, Alana was already asleep. At around 2 a.m., her mother Kayla picked her up from the living room, carried her to her bedroom, and tucked her into bed. She covered her with her favorite blanket, an Elsa blanket she slept with every night. Matt returned home at approximately 2:30 a.m. Zachary Anderson arrived later, sometime between 3:30 and 3:45 a.m. The two men stayed awake talking until around 4 a.m. Eventually, both of them went to sleep. Zachary staying overnight was not unusual. He had stayed at the house before, and the family considered him someone they could trust. At that point, nothing appeared out of place. At 8:30 a.m. on August 20th, Kayla and Matt woke up. Alana was not in her bed. At first, they assumed she might be somewhere else in the house. They checked her room, the living room, the rest of the house. She wasn't there. Then they noticed something else. Matt's work truck, a 2002 GMC Sierra, was gone. His phone, which had been left inside the truck, was also missing, and Zachary Anderson was no longer in the house. At that moment, it became clear this was not a normal situation. They began searching outside the house and around the property, hoping Alana had wandered off. They found nothing. At 9:56 a.m., they contacted law enforcement. Officers responded immediately. Given Alana's age and the circumstances, investigators quickly determined she could not have left on her own. At 1:12 p.m., an Amber Alert was issued. Authorities publicly identified Zachary Anderson as a person of interest and confirmed he had been driving the missing GMC Sierra. Investigators also stated he did not have a prior sex offender record, and at that point, a motive was unknown. Law enforcement began gathering digital and physical evidence. Investigators contacted Zachary Anderson's mobile carrier to track his phone. They learned he had been seen at a store near Browerville at approximately 8:30 a.m. He was alone. There were no reports of Alana's being seen with him. At the same time, investigators began tracking Matt's phone, which was believed to still be inside the truck. Cell tower data showed the phone had traveled into Todd County. The first signal in that area was recorded around 6:30 a.m. The last signal was recorded at approximately 9:01 a.m. After that, the phone stopped transmitting. Less than an hour after the Amber Alert was issued, investigators received a call from Zachary Anderson's father. He told authorities his son had contacted him earlier that day and asked for permission to go to the family's cabin in rural Cass County, near a location called Pillager. The cabin was approximately 90 miles from Watkins. He also gave investigators permission to search the property. This provided investigators with a specific location to focus on. Deputies left immediately. When law enforcement arrived at the Anderson family property, they located the missing GMC Sierra. It had been driven into a ravine and concealed. Its position indicated it had been intentionally hidden. This confirmed Zachary Anderson had been there. Investigators then searched the cabin. Inside, they found firearms and ammunition. They also found a handwritten note believed to have been written by Zachary Anderson. The contents of the note suggested suicidal intent. There was also blood present. However, neither Zachary Anderson nor Alana were inside the cabin. Deputies began searching the surrounding area. They located footprints leading away from the cabin and into the nearby woods. Cass County Deputy William Connor and his K-9 partner, Yankee, began tracking from the area near the truck. The dog followed a scent trail into a swamp. At approximately 4:24 p.m., about a quarter mile from the cabin, deputies located Zachary Anderson. He was standing knee-deep in swamp water. He had visible cuts on his arms. He did not attempt to flee. He was taken into custody without resistance. Officers immediately began questioning him. They asked where Alana was. At first, he denied knowing anything. Investigators read him his rights. He stated he did not want to talk. However, investigators continued asking direct questions about Alana's location. Eventually, he responded. He told them she was in the swamp. Deputies asked him to show them where. He agreed. he led investigators to a specific location. There, submerged in the water and concealed beneath debris, deputies found Alana's body. She was not clothed. Her blanket was found nearby, approximately 75 feet away. At 6:02 p.m., the Amber Alert was officially canceled. The search had ended. The investigation was now being conducted as a homicide. After Zachary Anderson was taken into custody, investigators began reconstructing exactly what had happened. The search itself had depended heavily on canine tracking. Deputy William Connor's police dog, Yankee, followed a scent trail from the area near the cabin into the swamp. Authorities did not have a specific clothing item belonging to Zachary Anderson to use as a scent reference. Instead, the dog tracked human odor present along the path. That tracking led directly to Anderson's location. Without that, investigators later acknowledged, locating him could have taken significantly longer. Once Alana's body was recovered, the medical examiner conducted a full autopsy. The official findings determined that the cause of death was asphyxiation, combined with blunt force trauma. These injuries confirmed Alana had been subjected to physical violence. The medical examiner also found evidence of sexual assault. This established that the crime involved both homicide and sexual violence. These findings would directly shape the criminal charges filed against Zachary Anderson. At the time of his arrest, Zachary Todd Anderson was 25 years old. Prosecutors formally charged him with multiple felony offenses. These included second-degree murder criminal sexual conduct involving a child under the age of 13, kidnapping to facilitate the commission of a felony, kidnapping with intent to inflict great bodily harm. Each charge carried significant prison penalties. Taken together, they exposed Anderson to the possibility of spending decades in custody. The court set bail at $1 million with conditions, or $2 million without conditions. He remained in custody. Investigators also examined Anderson's background. According to official records, he had no prior convictions for violent crimes. His criminal history consisted primarily of minor traffic violations. Law enforcement officials publicly confirmed there had been no prior indication he posed a violent threat. There was no documented history identifying him as a sexual offender. At that stage, investigators stated they had not identified a clear motive. This absence of warning signs made the case more difficult for the community to process. Watkins was a small town. Many residents knew both the victim's family and Zachary Anderson personally. He was not a stranger passing through. He was someone who lived locally, someone who worked locally, someone who interacted regularly with people in the community. He had played softball with Alana's father. He had spent time in their home. He had been trusted. Following confirmation of Alana's death, community members gathered for vigils and memorial services. A visitation was held at a local funeral home. Alana's funeral took place at St. Anthony Catholic Church in Watkins. Teachers and school officials prepared to support students and classmates affected by the loss. Local residents expressed shock that a crime of this nature had occurred within their community. Many described the case as something they had never expected to happen in a town like Watkins. Fundraising efforts were organized to support Alana's family. Community members responded quickly.
WCCO's Liz Collin is in Watkins right now, where people are mourning the loss of Alayna at her visitation. Liz?
Amelia, there has been a long line outside this funeral home since the doors opened just a couple of hours ago. People here clearly choosing to remember Alayna for how she lived and not the unthinkable way she died. Now, mourners shuffled into the small funeral home as bubbles floated through the air. Alayna's visitation will last until 8 tonight and begin again tomorrow morning from 9 to 10 before her funeral. The family asked our camera not to go inside, but I can tell you the walls are filled with pictures of a happy little girl, along with Alayna's favorite toys. The school year will start in Watkins after Labor Day, and teachers said they will do what they can to help Alayna's classmates cope.
We have to strike that balance between remembering Alayna and making a safe and loving and normal environment for the rest of the kids, and that's going to be really tough.
And hundreds of people are expected to return here tomorrow for Alayna's funeral, set for 10:30 tomorrow morning at St. Anthony Catholic Church, which is just up the road here in Watkins. Amelia?
Just a heartbreaking situation, Liz. All right, thank you.
Investigators continued reviewing evidence, timelines, and Anderson's movements leading up to the crime. Witnesses who knew him described his behavior prior to the incident as normal. There had been no obvious signs of instability or violence immediately before August 20th. This made the case more difficult to explain through behavioral warning signs alone. However, as investigators examined his past more closely, they began uncovering additional information that required further scrutiny. Some of these details dated back several years. At that point, investigators expanded their focus beyond the events of August 20th, examining Anderson's earlier history to determine whether there had been prior incidents or warning indicators that had not been previously reported. As investigators examined Zachary Anderson's background more closely, they discovered prior incidents that had not been widely known at the time of Alana's death. One of those incidents dated back to 2006, when Anderson was 16 years old and living in Wright County. At the time, he lived near a woman in her early 30s who had 2 young children. According to her later statement to investigators, Anderson had begun leaving notes on her vehicle. The notes were brief. He wrote that he thought she was attractive, left his phone number, and asked her to contact him. Because of his age and the nature of the messages, she did not view the behavior as harmless. She described it as concerning. She also suspected him of entering her garage without permission and taking cigarettes, although she did not have direct proof. The situation escalated several months later. One night, at approximately 1:30 a.m., she was awakened by loud knocking at her front door. Anderson was outside. He was partially clothed and demanding that she open the door. He attempted to manipulate the door handle and tried to enter the home. He left only after another adult inside the residence came to the door. Several months later, in June 2007, a second incident occurred. While the woman and her children were asleep inside the house, Anderson removed a window screen and entered the residence without permission. He took her phone from inside the home and left. This incident led to criminal charges. He was initially charged with burglary and theft. He later pleaded guilty to third-degree burglary. The court sentenced him to community service and ordered him to have no contact with the victim. Because Anderson was a juvenile at the time, the case was handled within the juvenile justice system. As a result, it did not receive significant public attention, and details were not widely known outside official records. After Alana's death, the woman learned that Anderson had been arrested in connection with the homicide. She later stated she was shocked by the development. She said she had been aware of his prior behavior, but had not anticipated that it could escalate to a crime of this severity. Meanwhile, the criminal case against Anderson proceeded through the court system. He was formally charged with multiple felony offenses, including first-degree murder, first-degree criminal sexual conduct, kidnapping, abuse of a corpse. He entered a plea of not guilty. His defense attorney filed motions challenging the admissibility of certain evidence. One of the primary legal arguments focused on Anderson's interaction with law enforcement at the time of his arrest. The defense argued that Anderson had invoked his right to remain silent, and that investigators continued questioning him after he had done so. The court reviewed the circumstances of the interrogation. Cass County District Court Judge Jana Ostad ruled that Anderson's constitutional rights had been violated during questioning. As a result, certain statements he made while in custody were ruled inadmissible. This included verbal statements made after he invoked his right to remain silent. It also included statements made while he was in the swamp. Additionally, the fact that he directed officers toward the location where Alana was found could not be used as evidence at trial. However, the court also ruled that physical evidence discovered independently remained admissible. This included Alana's body, the blanket found near the scene, clothing and other physical items recovered, medical examiner findings, photographs and forensic documentation. The court determined that this evidence had been obtained through lawful investigative procedures, independent of Anderson's inadmissible statements. The defense also filed a motion seeking dismissal of the charges entirely. The court denied that motion. The case continued. As the trial process moved forward, Anderson ultimately changed his plea. He pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. This charge included the element of sexual assault. By entering a guilty plea, Anderson accepted legal responsibility for the crime. As part of the plea agreement, the remaining charges were dismissed. Following the plea, the court moved forward with sentencing. Following his guilty plea to first-degree murder, the court proceeded with sentencing. Zachary Todd Anderson was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Under Minnesota law, this is the most severe sentence available. It means he will remain in custody for the rest of his life, with no opportunity for release.
A man accused of abducting and killing a 5-year-old girl from central Minnesota has been sentenced to life in prison without parole. Zachary Todd Anderson was originally charged with 19 counts for the death of the girl. An autopsy found that the girl was strangled. Prosecutors say Anderson pleaded guilty Friday to first-degree murder and criminal sexual conduct. Judge Jana Ostad then sentenced Anderson to life without parole, the mandatory penalty under Minnesota law. Anderson was arrested in August 2016 in Cass County after the girl was kidnapped from her home in Watkins, about 70 miles northwest of Minneapolis. Her body was found submerged and covered with debris near a cabin owned by Anderson's family near Motley. Anderson, who's from Coon Rapids, was considered a friend of the girl's father.
Cass County Attorney Benjamin Lindstrom later stated that the prosecution's goal had been to secure the maximum punishment allowed under state law, and that this outcome achieved that objective. From a legal standpoint, the case reached its conclusion. For Alana's family, the end of the court process did not mean the end of what they were living with. Alana was 5 years old. She was taken from her home in the early hours of August 20th, 2016, by someone the family knew and trusted, someone who had been allowed inside their home before. Investigators confirmed there was no forced entry. Access was part of what made the crime possible. The investigation established the basic sequence of events. Alayna was taken from the home, transported away, and later found near the Anderson family cabin. The medical examiner's findings confirmed she died as the result of a violent act. Anderson was arrested the same day. He later accepted responsibility in court through a guilty plea, and the sentence was imposed. In the months that followed, Alana's family made deliberate efforts to keep her memory visible. On October 31st, 2016, the day she would have turned 6, they held a birthday gathering in her honor. Over time, that grew into a community initiative known as Sharing Alana's Love, supporting families and children facing serious hardship. It became one way the family tried to make sure Alana would be remembered for who she was, not only for the case file attached to her name.
A family still struggling with the loss of their little girl is helping other families fighting their own heartache. A family friend is charged with kidnapping 5-year-old Alayna Ertl from her Watkins home last August. Investigators say Zach Anderson then killed Alayna near his cabin in Motley. Today, the Ertl family held a fundraiser called Sharing Alayna's Love. Proceeds went to a family whose daughter is fighting cancer. Alexis Vossen was diagnosed with a rare type of bone cancer last September.
I've been putting on wristbands. I've helped do some stuff around for the silence auction, and it's been really fun.
Alexis' dad says that after surgery, his daughter is cancer-free. The Ertl family tells us they've received so much support since their daughter passed away. They are grateful for, and it's events like this that keep Alayna's memory alive. They rode motorcycles today, also in honor of Alayna. Nearly 2 months later, a memorial continues to grow outside their Watkins home. The home to a family sorely missing its youngest member.
She was very loving.
Alayna was known for her friendliness and versatile personality, from her love of My Little Ponies to the time she spent hunting with her dad.
She'd come in our room every morning and give us a kiss good morning and, made sure everybody else was okay.
Kayla and Matt Ertl hold memories and many tokens close as they try not to concentrate on the evil that took Alayna away.
She's an innocent little girl that did nothing wrong.
Matt had worked with Zach Anderson at a utility line company for 4 years. Anderson lived in Coon Rapids, so when they'd play softball in the summer, he'd sleep over. On that Saturday morning in August, the family woke up to find Anderson and Alayna missing, along with Matt's pickup. 3 hours after an Amber Alert was issued, canine officers found Anderson near his family's cabin by Motley. Alayna's body was found nearby. Investigators say she'd been sexually assaulted before Anderson killed her.
People that you think that you know, and that you trust, and become your friend, and you have in your home, and turn your back on you, and you don't understand it.
The Ertls admit they will struggle trusting new friends moving forward. Still, they are continuously reminded of the good that remains.
The support has been overwhelming.
Yeah.
Gifts and cards from so many touched by Alayna's life.
This one, too, was a journal or a day-by-day.
Even strangers from states away pledging to be more patient parents and not taking the time they have with their own kids for granted.
He'll make comments of certain shows or different things he did that made her laugh.
The Ertls are pushing on for their son, Carter, and for their small community that created a public space to heal.
Look outside and there'd be 4 or 5 kids just sitting around, sitting there reading books, and it's cool to see.
It's where they find comfort in the words they are certain Alayna would want them to hear. When it rains, watch for rainbows. When it's dark, watch for stars. Liz Collin, WCCO 4 News.
Zachary Anderson will spend the rest of his life in prison. That part is final. But a sentence does not restore what was taken. Alana went to sleep in her own home. She was 5 years old. She was where she was supposed to be. By morning, she was gone. The investigation identified the person responsible. The court delivered the maximum sentence available under the law. That is what justice looks like on paper. But the real impact of a case like this is what remains afterward. The routines that never come back, the space in a home that can't be filled, and the future that ended far too soon. And that is why this case still matters. Not because of the headlines, but because Alana was real, and she should still be here,